Good morning, everyone. It's Thursday, September 2nd, coming to you live from Seoul. I'm Kim Mo-gyan. Before we begin, these are the stories we're following at the top of the hour. South Korea reports around 1,900 new COVID-19 cases Thursday, continuing to linger close to the 2,000 mark. Authorities plan to announce new social distancing measures tomorrow. South Korea's gross domestic product for the second quarter of 2021 rose 0.8% compared to the first quarter. It's 0.1 percentage point higher than earlier expected. And the OPEC and its allies, led by Russia, agreed on Wednesday to stick to their existing policy of gradual oil production increases. They ratified a 400,000 barrel per day supply increase for next month. We begin with the COVID-19 situation. The daily caseload has consistently stayed around the 2,000 mark for the midweek tallies here in South Korea. And despite the highest social distancing rules for the past 8 weeks and even more tightened measures for the last week and a half, the numbers are yet to yield. For more on this, we have our Kim Do-yeon at the News Center standing by. Do-yeon, give us the latest.
Well, again, South Korea reported 961 new cases of COVID-19 on Thursday, of which all but 34 were locally transmitted. As you mentioned, midweek tallies are usually higher than other days of the week and have been hovering around 2,000 for the past few weeks. Thursday's number is up 79 cases from the same day last week, showing a slight increase. And with such consistent high numbers of daily cases, also came a rise in the number of deaths. There were 11 additional deaths reported, and currently 371 are in a critical condition. This is South Korea's 58th consecutive day to report a 4-digit caseload. Now on the vaccination front, nearly 178,000 people received their first doses on Wednesday, with more than 57% of the nation having now received one jab. This comes as around 32% completed their vaccinations as of midnight as well. With the inoculation campaign picking up speed, more doses are coming in from overseas in the coming weeks following a deal struck by South Korea and Romania. This is good news for authorities as they remain concerned about the delayed arrival of Moderna vaccines. Han Sung-woo tells us more.
Around 1.5 million doses acquired from Romania will arrive at Incheon International Airport across 2 days, the 2nd and the 8th of this month.
526,500 doses of Pfizer will arrive on the 2nd. The same number of Pfizer doses plus 450,000 doses of the Moderna vaccine are set to arrive on the 8th. The Pfizer shots were purchased while the Moderna doses were acquired in exchange for medical supplies that Romania needs.
The shots will be used to inoculate those in the 18 to 49 age bracket. Korea had earlier provided Romania with test kits last year in March to mark the 60th anniversary of the two countries establishing diplomatic relations. Despite the boost, though, some officials fear the government's goal of getting 70% of the country vaccinated with their first doses before the Chuseok holidays may not be met if Moderna fails to deliver its promise of 6 million doses by this week. Meanwhile, Korea is currently working on its own vaccine, and leading the charge is SK Bioscience, who began Phase 3 trials on Monday. According to health authorities, 10 million out of the 90 million vaccine doses to be purchased next year will be bought from domestic developers. This comes amid Samsung Biologics' discussions with Moderna on allowing COVID-19 vaccines manufactured at Samsung's domestic facilities to be administered in the country. Samsung is reportedly set to start mass producing the shots within the 3rd quarter of this year. They will be shipped to countries other than the U.S. after receiving approval from Moderna and passing domestic qualification tests. Han Sung-woo, Arirang News.
The United States had more than an average of 160,000 new COVID-19 cases a day for the past week, according to Johns Hopkins University. The last time the country saw the number of new cases this high was in late January when vaccines were not widely in use. This comes as schools reopen and cases among young children are surging rapidly. According to reports, pediatric COVID-19 cases topped 200,000 last week with an average of 330 admissions to hospital per day. The World Health Organization has identified another variant that could potentially have immunity to vaccines. On August 30th, the organization added variant B.1.621, labeled as the Mu variant, to the variant of interest list, saying the Mu variant has a constellation of mutations that indicate potential properties of immune escape. This strain was spotted in January this year in Colombia, and while it makes up less than 0.1% of cases worldwide, it is behind 34% of all infections in Colombia. The WHO is currently watching 5 VOIs, or variants of interest, including the Lambda variant.
In the second quarter of this year, the South Korean economy grew more than expected. The preliminary data released by the Bank of Korea on Thursday said the second quarter real GDP was up 0.8% on quarter. This is 0.1 percentage point higher than expected for the April to June period. The country's economy has been growing for 4 quarters in a row. Private consumption played a big role in the growth, increasing by 3.6%, the highest figure in 12 years. It was led by a rise in spending in the service sector, including restaurants and accommodation, and for semi-durable goods such as clothing. South Korea's consumer prices jumped 2.6% on year in August, staying between 2 and 3% for the 5th straight month. According to Statistics Korea on Thursday, the consumer price index last month stood at 108.3. That's also 0.6% higher than in July. Data shows that the growth was due to a rise in prices of agricultural and industrial goods. Prices of agricultural, livestock, and fishery products soared 7.8% on year, while industrial products rose 3.2% from a year earlier, the biggest rise in more than 9 years. OPEC and its allies have decided to maintain its current policy of gradually increasing oil production for October, citing strengthening market fundamentals and recovery picking up pace. This means that they will release 400,000 barrels per day to the market next month. Kim Sang-min reports.
The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries and its allies led by Russia on Wednesday agreed to stick to their existing policy of gradual oil production increases. The agreement was reached during an online ministerial meeting where ministers ratified a 400,000 barrel per day supply increase for next month. The member states had agreed earlier in July to phase out record output cuts by adding 400,000 barrels per day on a monthly basis. The group said in a statement that, while there is ongoing uncertainty posed by the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, market fundamentals have strengthened and recovery is accelerating. The decision was made a day after OPEC Plus revised up its forecast for 2022 oil demand growth to 4.2 million barrels per day from its previous 3.28 million barrels per day, suggesting that there could possibly be an output increase in the future. Wednesday's decision also comes despite continuous pressure coming from the U.S. to raise production more quickly. The U.S. has been calling for faster output increases by the group as benchmark Brent crude traded above $70 per barrel, close to multi-year highs. After the announcement, oil prices steadied on Wednesday, Brent crude falling 4 cents to around $71.60 a barrel, and U.S. West Texas Intermediate rising 9 cents to some $68.60 a barrel. Kim Sang-min, Arirang News.
The Biden administration has extended for another year a Trump-era ban on the use of U.S. passports for travel to North Korea. The State Department announced the extension until August 31st, 2022, with a Federal Register notice to be published on Thursday. Humanitarian groups have expressed concern about the impact the ban is having on providing relief to the regime. The ban was first imposed by former Secretary of State Rex Tillerson in 2017 after the death of an American student after he was released from North Korean custody. With growing uncertainties in Afghanistan after the U.S. military's rapid exit from the country, the Taliban says it will announce on Friday the formation of a new government. The group will be led by Haibatullah Akhundzada, and he will head any governing council that will be established. Kim Hyo-san reports.
Following America's complete withdrawal from Afghanistan, the Taliban said Wednesday that its supreme commander will head any governing council in the country. Saying Haibatullah Akhundzada will be the top leader, the Taliban added there will also be a prime minister post. Akhundzada was appointed to the post in 2016 and since then has had the final word on the group's political, religious, and military affairs. The Taliban also stressed the new government will be a model for the Afghan people. Russia's state-run news agency Sputnik reports that the Taliban will announce the formation of a new government on September 3rd. Meanwhile, the Taliban is reportedly in talks with the governments of Qatar and Turkey on ways to manage Kabul airport, as it does not have sufficient air traffic control services after the U.S. withdrawal. Technical teams from Qatar are now in Kabul to provide assistance. Wishing to be recognized as a normal state internationally, the Taliban is aiming to quickly resume the airport's operations. This comes as the Taliban is exerting tremendous efforts domestically to fight anti-Taliban forces. The group has sent fighters to the Panjshir Valley stronghold of the National Resistance Front, which includes both anti-Taliban fighters and former Afghan security forces who have vowed to defend the region. The valley, which starts some 80 kilometers north of Kabul, is the main enclave for anti-Taliban forces in Afghanistan. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
The Taliban is now in control of Afghanistan, but the country is still rife with instability, division, and violence. According to a former U.S. ambassador to Kabul, the threat of terrorism looms in large part due to a dire lack of intel on the ground. Oh Soo-young with the details.
President Biden may have declared an end to the war in Afghanistan, but 2 decades of blood and treasure spent in a bid to root out terrorism have done little more than to reset Afghanistan to pre-September 11th conditions. This according to Hugo Lawrence, former US ambassador to Afghanistan, during an interview with Arirang TV. After the last batch of American forces left Kabul, President Biden said Tuesday that the US would continue to counter terrorism without having to fight a ground war to do it. But without military and intelligence on the ground in Afghanistan, Lawrence is pessimistic.
And I think we're going to have to deal with the terrorist threat as best as we can, but from an unfavorable position, trying to gather intelligence from 1,000 miles away, trying to launch military strikes from 1,000 miles away. Before we could get an aircraft on target from one of our bases, US and NATO bases, in 10, 15 minutes. We were there. We had the Afghan intelligence services were 15,000 intelligence officers, and they were in every one of Afghanistan's 34 provinces. Over those 20 years, we disrupted hundreds of terrorist cells all over Afghanistan.
With the Taliban back in power, observers fear that Afghanistan will once again become a hotbed of terrorism, given the group's ties to an even more extreme al-Qaeda. The situation is further complicated as smaller groups scattered across Afghanistan's northern regions are resisting the Taliban's takeover, sparking concerns of a civil war.
We always estimated that there were about 20 international terrorist groups operating in some of the ungoverned space in Afghanistan. And our fear is that a weak Taliban could result in these groups rising up. So it is a potentially very complicated situation.
As the Taliban looks to solidify its rule by forming a cabinet, Lauren says it's vital that the US play a role in the process, ensuring they don't harbour terrorists and also form a more inclusive government that respects the rights of all ethnic and tribal groups, including women and minorities.
If the Taliban cooperates, we want to engage them and we want to work with them. We need to advance our interests. But I would say that it's a very difficult situation because prior to that, we had an allied government, a pro-Western government. Now, these were our former enemies, and it's going to be very complex.
The retired diplomat says the Biden administration must strengthen cooperation with its allies and work with China and Russia to try and stabilise Afghanistan and hopefully stop extremist groups threatening regional security. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
South Korea's national football team take on Iraq tonight in their first game in the final qualifiers for the Qatar World Cup. Kicking off at 8 p.m. Korea time at Seoul World Cup Stadium, South Korea has a track record of 7 wins, 11 draws, and 2 losses against Iraq. But several key players, including Tottenham Hotspur's Son Heung-min, only arrived here a few days ago after a long flight, so they may or may not be called upon to play. South Korea's head coach Paulo Bento says it's up to the squad to adapt to the circumstances they face. Leading Iraq is a former head coach of South Korea, Dick Advocaat. The world's oldest film festival, the Venice International Film Festival, has kicked off an 11-day run. A total of 92 films from 56 countries will be screened during the festival. 21 will be competing for the Golden Lion Award, including the American film Mona Lisa and the Blood Moon, and Spencer, that deals with the life of Princess Diana. While a South Korean film was not included in the invitation list, the Oscar-winning director of Parasite, Bong Joon-ho, is the head of the international jury. According to Italian reports, he said last year felt like a test which showed the life force of cinema, and the pandemic won't let the history of cinema stop so easily. From Oscar-winning movies to globally chart-topping songs, South Korea's cultural content has been exploding in popularity around the world. The local industry continues to churn out hits that resonate with international audiences as the world struggles against the pandemic. Shin Yeon reports.
You could say Korean culture is immune to COVID-19. In K-pop, BTS topped the charts this summer with Butter. The hit song has had the longest run at the top of the Billboard charts of any song this year. Korean movies like Alive and Space Sweepers became the most watched shows around the world on Netflix soon after their release. In an annual report released by the Korean Foundation for International Cultural Exchange, South Korea saw its total exports of Korean cultural content goods jump up by more than 10% despite the pandemic. The main researcher said the surge was largely due to video content like Korean dramas, variety shows, and games.
Thanks to a lot of K-content being exposed through OTT platforms, they were able to gain popularity. So Korean games and video content actually benefit from more people consuming content at home during the pandemic.
The 2021 Global Hallyu Trends Report was compiled after surveying 8,500 consumers from 18 countries. I came to the 12th Culture Communication Forum to find out what exactly makes K-content so appealing. Held every year since 2010, the forum brings together foreign journalists, communication experts, and ambassadors to discuss the power of culture. Those at the forum said Korean cultural content stands out due to its unique characteristics.
Drama you watch, the movies you watch, the songs you hear, there is always a message that it is related to life. This is what happens in real life, right? So people are interested. So that's why you can attract people to watch it. It's real.
K-pop in particular projects very positive values, projects happiness, love, brotherhood. In one word, it projects some kind of utopia that strikes a chord to millions of youngsters and teenagers all around the world.
Throughout the forum, experts said that culture is like the string that brings countries together, and South Korea's thread is reaching further. Shin Yeon, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. We start with the results of new research by the University of Chicago's Energy Policy Institute, showing that an average person is losing around 2.2 years of life expectancy due to air pollution. According to its Air Quality Life Index published Wednesday, there's increasing evidence showing that climate change caused by fossil fuel burning is harming people's health. The index notes that a hazardous particulate matter known as PM2.5 is generated from the burning of fossil fuels, which causes harm to human health. According to the Institute's director, Michael Greenstone, when looking across the global population, air pollution is cutting 17 billion years of life expectancy. The report also notes that the burden of harmful air pollution is unevenly distributed, with China making rapid, measurable progress in cleaning up its air, while other regions like South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa are now emerging as new pollution hotspots. In many areas of the world, air pollution is now an even bigger public health threat than tuberculosis, HIV, and smoking. To push for better air quality worldwide, the report also shows how much life expectancy can be extended by making changes. For instance, if China were to meet air quality standards set by the WHO, people there would live an average of 2.6 years longer, while Indians would gain nearly 6 more years if they were to breathe air in accordance with the UN Health Agency standard. Over to the U.S., where the nation's auto safety regulators said Wednesday that they have received a report on the 12th crash involving a Tesla car using its advanced autopilot system. The crashes are all being reported as involving emergency vehicles such as police cars. The 12th accident occurred in Orlando, Florida on Saturday when a highway patrol officer who stopped to assist a disabled motorist on a major highway was struck by a Tesla vehicle. The National Highway Traffic Safety Administration formally opened its safety probe into Tesla's autopilot program last month. Prior to the latest accident, the safety regulators reported 17 injuries and 1 death in the 11 crashes, all involving emergency vehicles. While Tesla introduced the autopilot system as having full self-driving capability, the company says the current features do not make the vehicle autonomous. And finally, staying in the U.S., tens of thousands of people have been evacuated from Lake Tahoe in Northern California as a major wildfire in the area continues to spread. With the Caldor fire already burning across more than 191,000 acres and just 16% of the fire brought under control, more than 3,500 firefighters have been deployed to combat the blaze, which started more than 2 weeks ago. South Lake Tahoe and its surrounding areas were issued an evacuation order on Monday, with 5 people having been injured and more than 700 properties damaged or destroyed. The area is a popular holiday destination with 22,000 residents. 이승재, Arirang News.
Good morning. Today's weather conditions look to be more of the same of what we have seen. Rain in southern parts of the country through tomorrow. We can see these thick rain clouds approaching to the southern parts of the country. So Jeju and the coastline of Jeollanam-do province are forecast to be hit the hardest, receiving more than 80 millimeters of heavy rain in showers along with strong winds. So please be extra careful and get the latest travel updates if you're traveling down south. Autumn feels like it's here with crisp mornings and evenings and comfortable afternoon temperatures. Cooler readings are in store for rain-affected regions, while heat alerts in Jeju and Gyeongsang-Namdo province have also been lifted. Jeju Island will rise to 28 degrees Celsius this afternoon, which is about 5 degrees lower than yesterday. The capital region can expect some sunshine on Friday and through the weekend, but Gangwon-do province and those in southern regions need to brace for on and off heavy rain for a few more days. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that will do it for us at this hour on Arirang News. We'll be back with our next newscast at noon Korea time. Thank you for watching.